Who is actually which organization or organizations are actually interested in addressing these issues? How do we come up with this committee?
Well, Elizabeth and I have come up with the stakeholders who were involved in this. This is the NRD's drought planning process, okay. But we want it to be not just us making some stuff up in a vacuum. So we want to make this as collaborative and sort of partnership friendly or partnership ready as possible. So if there are ways that we can partner with specific organizations or other agencies in trying to implement the stuff that we end up coming up with the drought plan, we've already sort of established what those partnerships could be and what it is that we're all trying to accomplish. Okay, so let's do introductions real quick. We'll start with you. And when you tell me who you are, tell me a thing that you think about drought. It can be something from a past drought, something that you just had comes to mind, something that you find particularly challenging, whatever. Tell me a thing about drought. But remember to tell us who you are first.
Man. 2002 through 2007. Rick Preston, General Manager with Gearing, Fort Laramie Irrigation District. Probably for me, number one, 2002 to 2007 was a historic year on water shortage. Probably for me, the irritation in two parts was the surface water users were pinched down to about a 50 to 55% supply consecutively, while the groundwater continued to pump 100% supply. And common sense tells me that we continue to compound the issue because of that in the river. And anytime you make a hole in the aquifer, it's got to be filled from somewhere. So that was number one. Number two was there were districts downstream, and I'm talking from McConaughey down, that paid no attention to the fact that we were under drought situations, but they continued to allow water users from there down to have 100% supply along with pumping groundwater.
Are you talking about the surface water districts, the natural resources districts, or what? When you say districts?
Okay. I'm talking about irrigation districts.
Okay. Just one minute.
So those were probably some of my biggest irritations. And there's plenty more to add to that, but we'll get into that at another day.
There will be plenty of time for you to air more of those, Rick. Don't worry.
So my challenge was to deliver water from about the 5th of July to about the 5th of September on a 50% supply. And what we done was we put that in the hands of the landowners and basically told them this is the amount of water you're going to get in acre feet total for the year. And if you run it 100%, this is how many days you run. If you run at 75, this is how many days you run. If you run at 50%, this is how many days you run. And I will say this, the majority of the water users under our district said, you figure it, because I want to have water from the time we have it to the time it's gone.
Okay, so the landowners didn't really want that responsibility. They wanted to sort of put it back on you then, or?
Yeah, we put the responsibility on the landowner.
Okay.
Said it's your water.
Okay.
You decide. You want it all up front. You want it all gone in 40 days. You want it all gone in 55 days.
Okay.
You're going to get the choice, but here's the thing.
Okay.
When you use it, you're going to be shut off, and you're shut off for the rest of the year.
Okay.
So.
All right.
I'm Sandy Hendrick with Roosevelt Public Power District. I guess I haven't really thought on that front, but to me, the biggest impact is the financial impact on the agriculture in this area, and I think that impacts everything from there on. Nice to meet you.
You too.
deliver water to my farm.
So now you know who that guy is.
So now I know who that guy is. We don't have a lot of groundwater irrigation. Most of it is surface water irrigation that we have. We have some groundwater up north of Henry and a little bit up north of Mitchell.
In your district?
In our district.
Okay.
So that's not generally a problem to us. So they have surface water. So what they get is what we can deal with.
Okay. Thank you.
Kind of tough with the farmer in this group, I can tell you right now.
Oh, you should have seen the farmer group yesterday.
I'm just thinking all the rules apply to that guy. You know, a little bit of what you said bothers me, but the thing,
Who are you first?
frankly, so.
Okay.
But the thing is, we got to balance the agronomic impact, economic impact, and the environment.
Okay.
And you can't just have, if you take everything away from a producer and they can't produce a crop, the economics of that are pretty good.
Okay.
And I understand the environmental issues, but in any time you get out of that balance, or as close to that balance, and we make a strategic plan for a farm and we work hard on this. We have moisture probes, we have variable rate pivots. You know, we're trying to be proactive on droughts.
Mm-hmm.
But you can never lose track. You've got to balance those three things, or you're going to ruin something.
Okay. So is it for writing something down here, is it fair to say that balancing those three things is a particular challenge?
It
And
is for a
drought?
producer and for a ditch company. I mean, we're
Okay.
on a ditch company, and when our ditch is dry, there's an economic impact. You know, and we've got to try to keep sugar beet processors going. We've got to try to keep edible bean processors going. We've got to try to keep ethanol plants going and cattle feeding. I mean, we've got a lot of agriculture industry. So to just say, boom, you're done, the economic impact on that could be great, and we could actually lose something.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't get your name,
Frankly so.
pardon me?
Frankly so.
Yes, and when you find out who I am, you may know who I am. You're gonna feel like you have an odd guy out. I'm Kevin Adams, manager, Farmers Irrigation District.
Well, you're
I'm
also
a little
sort of
further
attached to
ahead
for
of
irrigation.
everybody sitting here, I guess, because of last year. You know, the issues, we sat there all day and went through this, with the university and stuff. Well,
What are you referring to?
I'm referring past, with the economics and past ag, some of the issues we discussed, if it was fire issues or mental health issues and all that, that trickles all the way downstream.
Okay.
I know in our district, I actually worked in Rick's district, but when you have a limited supply, and number one is our district supplies 1,000 acre-feet a day into the aquifer every day in Scottsbluff and Moore counties. And when you get short days, you run 40 days instead of 80, we're never going to fill that aquifer, no matter how many wells you shut off. It's never going to fill again. And what we do different from Rick is because we got so many pivots in our district. We set a rotation every day. We'll shut 150 CFS off every day. The summer just stretch the day. Because there's no way around it with that many pivots. I suppose we're 70% on almost 60,000 acres. So some of the issues I look at is not only working with you guys or any public entity, is working with my staff, and the amount of energy and planning that we do and our board does affects everything. And I think what Rick was getting at, I know he works on an acre-feet issue in the water short year, where we just work on, we're going to deliver you 90% of your supply so the pivots can run, and we're going to run this many days, rotate this much water off to gain, 70 days. And I know when I was working with Rick, some guys just wanted all of their water. And then 10 days before the end of the season, then they were off because they were set on an acre foot limit, which Pathfinder does and a few other districts. But when you also look at the issues of the NRD, without us, we wouldn't need it. There would be no aquifer, number one. And I raised this issue a few times when you start looking at, well, and I said on the committees with Rick and Dennis, the NRD, when they cut everything to 14 inches, except Pumpkin Creek, which is worse. And we sat there for a year and a half, and the state walks in and says, "You're not done." So then now you're done. Jesse Bradley said, "You get 14 inches." They couldn't come to a conclusion. And it seemed like nobody wanted to work together on that issue. And that was, then we went to the basin-wide management plan. And, there's a lot of issues out there. I've been with farmers since 1980. Rick's been in the irrigation as long as I have. We're the same age, 37 years or so. And you watch every issue trickle down, the stress it causes. Not only the producer, but the people working in the irrigation field and the people. It affects everybody. There's not enough money to go around. People quit spending money. I don't know. Am I getting way off too far?
No, you're okay, so I've been distilling the things that you said.
Yeah, and some of the issues, I mean, as we go forward and look at things that we looked at last year was, where are the emergency management funds going to come from for county roads or fire departments, ag people, everybody involved? It's a plan. When I visualize this plan, that's what I see is information for people to get by, find the funding, and survive another year. That's kind of.
You see my balance?
Yeah, balance, environment. You start drying up all kinds of wetlands.
You got to take care of the aquifer.
Yeah.
But you got to, take care of the economy too, because we are an ag economy. How we get away. Would you agree? We're ag based.
Oh yeah, the state's ag based, and this part of Nebraska is just about totally ag based.
The problem with this drought plan or the water plan, our state, the only place we have water plan is in the west.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice, hopefully this plan can move through the state.
I
That'd
think
be cool.
we discussed a little of that. I mean, at the association meetings in Kearney last year, I seen some of the people, and of course, you know how my mouth runs. I was explaining to them, well, we're going to start here. We have to keep going eventually. And it affects a lot, especially in this part of the country. You look at, there were no trucks on the road for 9 months. Nobody moving corn, a sunset in the basement. There's no drivers needed.
Can I just
Okay.
add one thing to mind?
Yes, you can have one thing.
I don't think we have a broad enough land. When we broke it down to our farm, we
being your plan that you have, or okay,
and I give you that.
okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about those kinds of things later.
But we broke it down into some agronomics, how
Okay.
producers, whether it's like no-till,
Mm-hmm.
Trying to maintain your soils organic manner, trying to build on that, trying to do things agronomically to help, so you need less water.
Okay.
So a guy isn't out there ripping, discing, plowing. We all need to have some education in water saving.
Okay.
And I don't really see anybody working that way.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we can put it in right now. So do you see that as, well, you're talking about educating people about those things.
Well,
And you're also talking about actually implementing those things on the farm, right? Okay.
being a solution to the problem.
Okay, so those are, what you're talking about are strategies
Mhm.
for dealing with drought. So for those things that you just said, are those things do you think that need to happen before a drought, during a drought, or
Before the
after?
drought, you need to be
Before.
proactive.
Okay,
I'll give farmers or biggest problem of causing some of these issues, because we overdeveloped some ground in the 70s.
Okay.
Because we were trying to help our financial statements by improving pasture ground and turning into irrigation. And we caused some problems. So now the farmers need to lead. I think farmers need to lead the charge and be proactive in setting up some practices. That's what we're doing on our farm. We have moisture probes out there. We have variable rate pivots. I mean, we can grid sample. There's this technology, we can do so much. And the university can do so much in education.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about those things later. Okay, thank you, everybody. That's good. And we're going to talk about more of those kinds of things in a little bit. Okay, so, we're going to do a little audience participation part now. But before I do that, I want to tell you what you're doing. So, what I want you to do is you're going to have to share. You can't have all of these. What I want you to do is write down on those sticky notes some impacts of drought. You can also write vulnerabilities if you want to. Now, what am I talking about when I say that? A drought impact is a negative effect that directly results from drought. So, for example, wildfires, because everybody's pasture in the rangeland is dry. Sort of like the Ash Hollow fire we apparently had the other day. I found that yesterday. So that is a negative impact of drought. Okay. A vulnerability is some kind of particular characteristic of the system or the place that you live, or a sector or a group of people in your community that is particularly exposed to some kind of negative effect because of something about them. For example, the city of Oshkosh we had someone from Oshkosh here yesterday, so this comes to mind. The city of Oshkosh has a lot of water quality problems right now already, okay? So their system is already vulnerable because of those water quality issues. Now, in a drought, they anticipate that their water quality would get even worse because of the limited supply to their wells. So that decrease, that worsening water quality is an impact, but then the people who then are exposed to that poorer water quality become vulnerable to the kinds of physical health effects that come from drinking water that's not very good for you. Does that make sense? Okay, so
actually what you don't have is a purification of the aquifer if you do the less returns.
pretty much.
So
Yes.
less flushings.
I don't know, I'll talk the other time.
He's not talking out of turn.
No, me.
Oh.
But
All right, well, you didn't interrupt him. Go for it.
some of the issues we looked at when USGS got done with our canals again about 8 years ago or so, 10. They looked at how fast the water went in. I have a section outside of Mitchell. It was 22 hours and it was in the aquifer warming the water and headed straight for the river. A lot of the system in Scottsboro County, the water's 10 years old. It's how fast it comes through from, especially me and Pathfinder, putting so much in the aquifer. It's not real old water. So when you get to a drought, the water quality comes in. So
Is the water really changed, or do the standards change?
So, there are the standards for drinking water quality have changed and they've become a little more strict. But what also happens is that there's been an amount of research on this from the university recently, that particularly in an aquifer like ours, that has a lot of naturally occurring arsenic and uranium, and also has nitrates in it, some of which are naturally occurring, some of which have been added that as you pump water out of the aquifer, then the nitrates that are in the water change the microecology of all of the bacteria and stuff that live in the aquifer. And so they start mobilizing that arsenic and uranium it's just kind of hanging out, and push and dissolve it and push it into the water. So then when you are pumping your water out, you're also bringing that extra arsenic and uranium out where you didn't used to be doing that before. So it's actually, it's stuff that's already there, but our pumping of the aquifer is making it show up in our water more.
So that's why they raise the standards.
No, actually, water quality standards are set at a national level, and that's usually based on things like CDC research. But the university here, in trying to figure out why are all these systems in the North Platte Valley having so many problems with arsenic and uranium, regardless of what the standard is, they're finding that it's actually the pumping of the aquifer that is contributing to that. So we probably, even if standards weren't lower than they used to be, we would still have problems.
Does the NRD feel that
We're starting to get a little off topic.
Okay.
We can talk about this at break.
Right.
What I want you to do right now is write on your sticky notes, legibly.
Oh.
No, you're all going to do it. This isn't group work. This is individual work. Write one impact or vulnerability of drought per sticky note.
One vulnerability.
One thingy per sticky note. One impact, one vulnerability, I don't care which. And then when you're done, you're going to bring them up here and you're going to categorize them according to whether they are things that happen before, during, or after drought. And if you write down the vulnerability, you're going to stop. Does everybody understand? Good. Go.
You're supposed to write one.
One thing per sticky note, yes.
How many sticky notes?
As many as you need. There's no limit. You got to do at least one, though.
One thing.
You have to write at least one sticky note.
Whole sticky.
Kevin.
One
A lot of lines
thing,
on
one thing
there.
on your sticky
I
note.
can't have impact and vulnerability on the same one.
No. Well, I said
Give me another.
one thing per sticky note.
Okay. All
You only got one?
right. Just one note.
No, you can have more ones.
Is that okay?
Is that the only thing you can think of?
But then
You can think of more
This
things.
is
You
a-
write more of them down.
Small.
this is vulnerability, right?
We're going to talk about that. Right? You can categorize it according to what you think it is, and then we're going to talk about what the group thinks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I put them together and you can flip them over.
No,
Just-
no.
was the questions again?
Write down one impact of drought or one vulnerability related to drought on a sticky. And then come up here and categorize them according to whether they happened before drought, during drought, or after drought.
Nothing happens before drought.
This is really a new,
Sometimes that's true.
new process for me.
Well, good. I hope you're learning something.
Well, I've been on task force before, but this is a different thing.
Well, I was speaking of task force, had an email. We may cut our other $500,000 on the riparian thing.
Well, then I guess you won't have to go to Kearney all that often, will you?
Are you ready to put this on the board?
Yes. If you're
So we
done,
can
go
go
ahead
up
and
there
put your
whenever?
stickies up there. Pardon?
We just go up there?
Yep. Go up there and do it.
And put them in between.
Yes.
Oh. You stole another one.
It's okay if more than one person writes down the same thing. That's fine.
Good, at least that means I'm thinking on the same lines with this.
That's
and
right.
it's kind of
It's not a
difficult.
bad thing.
Not my normal business routine.
So what if we all have the same ones?
Then I might make you think of some other ones.
I just think we're a good group. We're all
Yeah.
thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Now I see why we can't sit in the back of the room. We can't read the sticky notes.
Yep. Also, the microphone doesn't pick you up when we're recording.
I listened to the last one that was.
Uh-huh. It's really hard to hear everybody except me.
I even had trouble hearing you. It was very difficult. You couldn't hear anybody in the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying.
So I was hoping I didn't have to do that.
Well, I hope not. We're also going to look at getting a microphone to plug into the computer that will hopefully help with that. So particularly for the big group meetings, because that's just a large room anyway. So yeah, I hope we're going to get that nailed down. Okay. Gosh, that's a short list. All right. So we'll start with pre. And remember, these are impacts or vulnerabilities. So we may decide that they need to go somewhere else as we talk about them. So under before drought, someone said education ideas. Who wrote that? You did? What are you talking about there? What do you mean?
Well, I think in a good plan, we need to be proactive.
Okay, so is that an impact or is that a strategy?
I think that's a strategy before the
Okay.
fact.
Okay, so instead of being over here in impacts, do you think it should be over there instead?
It should probably be a strategy.
Okay. Put that over here. Do you think that education needs to happen only beforehand, or do you think that it should happen during a drought, after a drought, all of the above?
Well, I think that we should approach where we live with the water issues we have, we should approach it every year
Okay,
in our practice.
okay,
That's how we, here again, I'm just talking out of my
sure. That's why you're here.
no, I'm just saying, but I think where we live, water problems aren't gonna go away.
Okay,
Probably gonna get worse.
okay,
We're gonna have to learn how to do with less
okay,
and still take care of our common.
okay. So in thinking about that, even if you're approaching every year as a potential drought year, is that education only important sort of at the beginning of the year?
Well, I think you have to have a plan. That's
Okay.
where the education comes in.
Sure. But does that plan say, we're going to educate a bunch of people before drought ever happens and then stop?
No, it's a continuing process.
Okay. that should happen all the time. All right. Okay, somebody put in between, before, and during.
Well, I done that.
Did you actually want it to be there?
I
or-
done it in Beyondry, but
No. Do you actually think that it's straddles the two? I'm serious, because
well, it's, I mean, what does it say?
it says less returns to streams.
That's right.
Okay.
For us, Kevin and I, we can't plan a year in advance on a water supply.
Okay.
Our water supply is what it is come time to start delivering. That's it.
Okay.
So even before the drought begins, we may be in a situation where we don't have a full water supply to begin with, which was an issue starting in 2001, and then continued on.
Okay.
But the effects of that, and I say this for the simple fact that my district operates on about a 45% return flow off of all the fields and streams and everything else. So during those tough times, when we had short rainage, short snow, short water supply, those returns were down to like 15% of what we would normally pick up.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop there, because, as well, you can go on, but it doesn't just stop there. The impacts actually start then.
Mm-hmm.
But next year, it's continued.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just recover in a year. It
Okay.
takes,
Okay. So even so this is something that can be a problem before drought, when drought is starting, but it also can carry over into when drought is officially over.
right.
Okay. So I'm going to write that here. This being something that's also.
And even though come 2017, we got 100% water supply, but 2013, 14, 15, and 16 were dry years. We're not going to make up for those dry years in 1 year's water supply. It takes years to catch up with what just happened.
Okay.
Good.
I
Good question, though.
And Rick's the same way. I mean, I know I used to divert 350 feet into the system, but that don't happen anymore. But it took, after this last go around, and you guys know you monitor even through the 2000s, and this last few water short years, we never had a full aquifer until a year ago or two, and that's because of rain. So, and that ain't just the supplies, but it's also, and that's why they call it a drought, is because there's nothing being put back, zero. And we just keep taking, and now we know how full it is. I've seen the seepage. So it takes a lot of things and a lot of work as a Western Nebraska to get there. How long before you pump a full supply, or how long before you
Okay.
I think what he said is very powerful. In fact, could that be the vision for this?
What's that?
What he just said. I think so many people don't understand heading into a drought, or even just everyday practices can show up 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. And that's kind of what you were getting at, right?
Okay. So is that something that should be part of the education?
Well, I think it should be the vision. I think
Okay.
that probably sums up what you're trying to do here. What you do today can affect you tomorrow.
Sure. But if we made that the vision for this plan, do you think that everybody knows what that means?
If it's explained, I mean
right now, do you think that everybody in this district, not just you guys, know what that means?
They should. What you do today.
Okay, they should, but if they don't,
So you're talking,
should helping everybody to understand what that means be part of the education?
there's a lot of people out there don't understand in this area.
But what I was getting at, I like that for a vision statement.
Okay. Well, actually, we're going to be doing something kind of like that towards the end. So I'm going to make a note here, but hold on to that.
He's the author.
Yeah, Ricky.
He may just,
Okay, I'm going
he
to
may
point at
just,
both of you.
By
when we get
Ricky
to that
then.
part,
I think
and
he
you
may
guys
just
get
been the
to
rock star of this group. Because what you said, that's very powerful. The way I interpret it. What you do today, how does it reflect you tomorrow?
And the biggest part of that is The people on the land, the people in the district see it first. We see the creeks and everything dwindling.
Farmers is willing to see anything.
They don't know.
Last minute things. I mean, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean,
You guys.
we see it all the time.
Exactly.
So for an example on what I'm talking about there, and I'm gonna say this because, and I can't speak for Kevin or Dennis or whomever, but I know they're operating as similar. We have learned through the historical drought years that water in the month of May is a very positive time of year for not only the irrigation districts, but the aquifers and the streams, things like that. Because when we bring that water in May, we start soaking that back up. And I got some more stuff over here. So what we've learned is we run the month of May and then we shut the water off the 1st of June. And we don't bring it back in until the 18th of June. For that 3 weeks, we've let that canal alone. 2 reasons. One is because our losses are so high in the month of May that when we take that water out, it's almost like that mud kind of seals up, all the fractures and pores seal up.
Mm-hmm.
But during that month of May, it starts pushing the water back in to the aquifer. The farmers start irrigating their hays or grains or beets or whatever else. That starts putting water back into the aquifer as well as the runoff. But in the post-recovery or during response, and I'm getting ahead of myself, I know, that's when we see the benefits of May water is in the 1st of July, because finally that May water we lost in May shows up in our streams and aquifers the 1st of July.
Okay.
So that lag time for that water to start showing up is a positive thing in our system.
Okay. So when that doesn't happen, because let's say you didn't have all that return in May, or you didn't have a full supply in May, so you couldn't run like you normally do in May. Who is particularly vulnerable in that circumstance?
During which months?
Doesn't matter.
Well, if you do not have the water in May, then everyone under the district, plus anyone receiving some of the return flows, feel that suffering. Everyone.
Okay.
Every other irrigation district, the river, and whatever else, because what you find, what happens is if you don't start getting those returns, then guess what? You got to go find that water somewhere, which means we're going to the user and we're having to pitch them from 100% supply to 95% or to 90% in order to give everybody an equitable share of that water that we have.
Okay. Who else relies on that seepage?
Power generation relies on that water.
Okay.
It's used to generate power.
Okay. Who
Some
else?
wildlife.
Wildlife.
Okay.
And the other thing about it getting into the drought is if you get out of the May water, pretty soon it's June 26th. Then it continues, then it's July before you put water in. That really stinks.
And then the other thing is, and Dennis was talking earlier, our canal before the silt run.
Oh, I want to talk about last year.
Oh,
We're not talking about last year. That's off topic.
before the silt run, and this is a vital part of our operations, is the silt run. Very vital. Kevin receives a benefit of it, even though he'll tell you, I receive the benefit and I don't have to pay a penny for it. But we'll go from 20 to 22% loss clear down to 9%, 8% loss. Well, 8% of 1,500 second feet of water is a pretty good chunk of water. When that starts coming back to you, that makes it real easy to deliver to every water user. But if you don't get that back, not only through the silt run, but through our returns back that are coming back to us after May water, then everyone that has anything to do with that water suffers.
Okay.
How that works is, and I lose more than Rick. So let's say I'm losing 40%. In June, in July, I'm going to drop to 10%. But by the middle of August, I'm climbing back to 20. We could never deliver without, because of no silt last year, I was this close to the road. Once that silt comes in and seals up, it gets us through the hard part of the season, then we start losing again. But without it, we couldn't operate.
Okay.
See, my canal will lose 600 acre feet a day. 600 acre feet. That's 300 CFS
Yeah.
a day before the silt run. We deliver 62% of our water to the farm before the silt run. You know what we can get into after the silt run? 88% of our water can go to the farm.
So it works.
What's that?
That's the way it works, the way the systems are set up.
And I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Well, yeah, sort of. And actually, somebody
We like to-
happily wrote down the thing I was trying to get you to, so we'll just talk about that. So, domestic wells to homes are depleted. That's something that happens during a drought and continues to be true after a drought. See, we're talking about all those nice return flows to your canal and all those nice return flows to the river. Some of that recharge water, quite a bit of that recharge water, allows people to have wells at their houses. So they don't have that so much when your recharge starts to go away. So, and as somebody happily pointed out, that continues to happen after a drought also. Make sense?
This is where I wrote down at the bottom there, longer lag times, longer recovery times.
Okay. So that's what this is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So
that's
this
what I
is
was saying.
recovery times for the aquifer?
Right. Or the
Stream
canal,
or-
or the canal,
Okay.
or it takes longer to recover after drought. If we had 100% supply every year, we have no issues. But the minute you miss a year or two, then what happens is the way you operated the first 2 years is gone because your lag times change in the returns. It changes everything.
Right.
Just the wind alone will change the way your water.
But as we get into this, and like he said, you gotta be looking at it prior to and every year, keep education going, is the districts no longer operate, since the 2000s, no longer operate like they used to, flow and go. We're looking at it, we're trying to save water in the reservoirs now,
Then my
to fight
second
off the next drought.
My second point was the reason we quit running water in June and we quit running water the second half of September was because we wasted 40,000 acre, just my district alone wasted on average 40,000 acre feet of water a year running in the month of June and the last half of September. I mean, we just dumped it down the river. We didn't leave it in the reservoir.
Okay, we're getting ahead.
Now, you do that for 10 years, you fill Pathfinder half full. That's just my district.
Can I ask
Okay,
a question on that?
go for it. Before we move on.
We got two gentlemen here that know a lot. I mean,
Right.
do they have ideas, or when's their ideas gonna come in to how it could be improved?
After we get done talking about this.
Okay.
We gotta get through these first.
No, I just want to understand the process. because
No, and I understand that, where there is gonna be space.
They are telling you the problems now, but I guarantee you they got some ideas on how to fix it.
Right, and we're gonna talk about those. Okay, water
But most of the
usage.
time, they don't taste real good. So.
No.
Yeah, but honesty is gonna be the best thing. All done.
Okay, water usage issues. I think you had the wrong marker. What did you have in mind for that?
Water usage?
Water usage
Okay.
issues, what is that?
Like we're on a little ditch board, so our ditch goes dry
Okay,
at the end.
at the end of the season?
No, down our way.
Oh, your water doesn't make it to the end of the canal. Okay.
Yes, we need one of these gentlemen to run our ditch, because yeah, we don't have a water organization.
I'm pretty sure none of them is gonna take you up on that.
But no,
Okay, so,
but I'm just saying there's big water issues. I mean, like, listen to these guys, if they gotta cut somebody to 50%, That's a big water usage.
Right. Okay.
If you're a fire department, you want to go to, I mean, like in Broadwater, they get water out of the city there.
Mhm.
If their pump's not pumping right. I mean, there's just,
Okay, so you're talking about a lack of supply availability.
exactly,
And you're talking about that groundwater and surface water?
everything, yeah,
Okay.
because it's all tied together. I mean, in my mind, it's all tied together.
I'll tell you this much. Here in Fort Laramie is roughly 55,000 acres. And you might find 4 wells on the farther northern edge of our system over by Henry. We have no groundwater in our system, none. And I don't mean this in a hard way, but I have no sympathy for the pumpers due to the fact I have no groundwater.
I picked that up.
Our
It's okay, I picked it up.
But I'm not saying that a groundwater user should not be entitled to water. That's not what I'm saying.
No,
Okay, public health. What you have in mind?
because dust
Okay,
is a big thing. I mean, the dryness in the air. I tell you, during the drought, the roads,
Mhm.
I mean, it can be good for people going down the road,
Okay.
breathing all that.
okay. So
It's a big issue.
when you think about
There's
that,
no humidity in the air. I mean, that's all
Right.
kind of stuff we need for health.
right, okay, so who might be particularly vulnerable to that dust and the dryness?
Well, I would think young children and old people.
Okay.
I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but that's what I feel.
Well, those are pretty good guesses, okay.
People with asthma.
Yeah, so they
Right.
have chronic disease.
Drives me crazy when you drive down a canal bank that's full of water and the canal bank's beat out because there's no moisture.
Well, man, you can't follow nobody.
No.
Well, in our area, we have
Tons of flowers.
depots, and you can't even see the road at night.
Oh, I used to live in miniature for a while. Wow.
Well, I'm just saying that dust, I
Yeah,
think,
that dust. Those are big health issues. You blow your nose, it bleeds, it's just the way it is. even
well,
when you're
dryness
healthy.
will make your nose bleed. I mean,
Like
you
in the
need a
winter.
certain amount of humidity, and I'm not a doctor, but I would assume you need a certain amount of humidity in the air for health.
Okay. Okay. What other public health issues might there be?
Well, then you got the mental issues.
Okay,
Just think when your irrigation supervisor says you got no more water and your crop's halfway developed. I'm not picking on you, I'm just saying that's a mental health issue for an agriculture.
sure,
I
sure.
mean, you gotta go and tell your banker,
Mhm.
Yeah, you can talk to our employees and us and even the board in the 2000s, just to stress the issues for me and my personnel and the landowners.
Mhm.
It
well,
was
and then you
big
take,
time, yeah.
living in dust, it wears down on you. I
Mhm.
mean, whenever you drive, it's just a cloud of dirt and you see the grass burning up, nothing for the cows. And the fire department, anybody's on a fire department, it's just on pins and needles.
Yeah,
It isn't a question of when, I mean,
Okay.
if, it's a question of when.
Okay. So do you think then that people like the fire department personnel, like the irrigation district personnel, are particularly exposed maybe to mental health stress?
Well, I think anybody in
Are there-
authority position.
Okay. Okay. Are there other groups that might also be particularly?
Well, the ones
Exposed
that
to
are
it?
affected economically by it.
Okay.
I think the people affected by the health and the economics of it, it bothers.
The people that are supplying everything to you are affected.
Well, no, you're in management. I mean, how about the mayor that's got to shut off water and lawns?
Yeah.
You know how some of them people get with that.
Okay.
They're
When
gonna
you're thinking about people who are economically impacted, is everybody economically impacted the same way? Does that look the same for everyone?
No, but everybody is economically impacted.
Right. Who might particularly be economically
Well,
impacted?
it's gonna start with the farmers,
Okay.
can end up the financial.
but it's gonna end up in town at Walmart and the dress shop and
banks,
the grocery
banks,
store.
Okay.
the banks.
Okay.
In
Who
this
is that?
area,
Who is that? You're right. Who is that particularly bad for?
The consumer?
All consumers or only some of them?
In our area here, everybody is tied to ag in some way.
Okay, sure. But does everybody all have the same amount of financial resources? Okay.
So it's gonna be your lower, what are you saying, your middle class?
You started to say something else.
Lower income.
Lower income.
All right.
I don't
Okay.
wanna be, I didn't wanna be.
I'm in that category.
It ain't gonna affect the
You're
doctors.
not.
Yeah, I've been there once.
Okay.
I probably still is.
Okay. So,
My friends.
okay. So maybe lower socioeconomic groups might also be a particularly vulnerable group. Okay.
That's right, the lawyers aren't gonna put an employer, they're on the drought or no drought.
You know, whenever we had those drought years, they said, we're putting a ban on burning. Putting a ban on you on, I'm gonna burn anyway.
That's why we buy fire trucks.
And they said, well, we're gonna fine you. I said, then send me the bill because we have to burn.
You'll plug siphons.
That's right.
And that'd be nice.
Okay. Anything else that you can think of in terms of impacts or vulnerabilities during a drought before we move on to that? We were just talking about fire. What about fire?
You guys are on Sunday meeting.
Thanks.
I know in our area, because there's a lot of grass.
Yeah,
Okay.
we started a cornfield on fire the other day.
You
No, but I mean, you
Good
know,
job.
I've seen a fire chief just really, really scared, because he's, you know, in our area, we've got miles and miles of pasture.
Okay. So maybe that increased risk of fire is also a negative impact?
Well, it's like tenfold, yeah.
Right.
That's,
A wheel bearing wiped out 8 houses.
you know,
No, when you think about it, a wheel bearing,
that was, when I heard about that, I thought to myself, really?
I mean, you never think about somebody's wheel bearing going out and burning your house.
No, particularly not hit your house and some other one. What started the Ash Hollow fire? Okay. Anything else during a drought that you might think of?
I'm sure we'll think of stuff as we go.
I'm just curious, do you have fire departments on this entire group?
Yes.
The large group?
Yes, we do.
Since I
Well,
was
we
at
have a
one
big
meeting.
but we got one to show up.
Is this Scottsbluff rural?
Gary.
Gearing.
But he was like the head guy, wasn't he, or something? The guy from Gearing, when he introduced himself, wasn't he?
Fire captain.
Yeah,
Think so.
that's good.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about that. We hope he stays part of the process. Okay, so post drought. So we already talked about domestic wells are still being depleted. This says, I don't know what that says. Impact to meat prices. Okay.
Well, I
Is that
just,
you?
yeah,
What
I
do you
just
think
was stupid little stuff. What am I thinking about?
Yeah, what do you, what
Anytime-
did you have in mind?
What did I have in mind? I'm
Mhm.
thinking of the drought in Oklahoma and Texas,
Okay.
southern Kansas, and they had to sell everything off.
Okay.
And then it affects the consumer
Okay.
the most, besides the people that have to sell off their economics. But
Mhm.
when then it becomes an overabundance, and then it becomes short, like it has.
You got a good point. Droughts affect food prices.
Food prices. That in turn affects everything.
Look how corn became $8.
Yeah.
Which thing ever happened.
Should say 5, might stay
It
there.
stayed at 350 to 4 years
We have to
ago.
revert back to some of our grandparents' way of living. You ever eat wild mustard greens?
No, but if I could find them, I would.
They're
Mustard greens are
burned up.
tasty.
They're gonna be burned up in the drought.
Yeah, they used
That's
to,
true.
during the Depression and stuff, that's what they ate.
But it will have an impact on food.
Mhm.
And it could have an impact like on ethanol.
Okay, so there are also manufacturing or industrial impacts that are also sort of coming along with those changes
Well,
in commodity
They don't have
prices.
the raw materials. I mean,
Okay.
like if there's no corn,
If you remember right, I think they shut 3 packing houses after they were done slaughtering everything. A lot of jobs lost.
The stock market suffer all areas. Just get her freezed out of Florida and see what happens.
you have to oranges.
We're doing well right now. See what happens in a year. Take it
That was a good one.
That little stupid meat prices was a good one.
Good job.
It's not stupid.
I know,
Impact to ag environment. I think that was you too.
that was me.
Yeah, what are you thinking about there?
I'm
What do you
thinking
mean by
about
ag environment?
the total environment
Okay,
from one sector to the end sector.
okay.
From being on the ground by
Okay,
was
so
what I
you're
was
thinking about,
Production.
production,
okay, the whole production
looking
to
at the whole
consumption.
production thing,
The whole
Okay.
cycle.
the whole cycle. It's millions of jobs.
Okay,
That's kind of what I was looking at.
okay, so you're thinking about jobs is that too, or are you thinking about,
I'm looking at people's livelihoods
okay,
on the farm to people being laid off from other jobs and those impacts. And then in that environment always comes out the final is the cost to people.
During the
That's
year
what I'm
that
looking
you had half the water, do you lay off half your staff?
at. And never really learn about it.
No, I just didn't know how that was.
No, we collect the same O&M every year. There's water or no water.
okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Or we put maintenance in.
Okay. And we talked about the longer recovery times and the less returns to the stream. Okay. So under vulnerabilities, we also have some sticky notes. Economic impacts. So you use the word impact in the vulnerability column.
I think we've all talked about it.
So, okay, so is economic impacts a vulnerability, or does it really go over here somewhere?
I put every one of mine in the wrong spot, so I'm sure.
Well, that's why we're gonna fix it, but we're gonna talk about it. So
You took my thunder, so put it where you want.
it happens.
We know it's a vulnerability because
Okay.
it's probably the number one vulnerability in our part of the country.
Well,
Should have just solved it.
One or two.
okay. So, but we've talked about some of the particular groups that are affected by those economic impacts. We've talked about rangers, I suppose you could put producers generally. We've talked about the lower socioeconomic groups. Who else?
Suppliers,
Pardon?
all your suppliers are
Suppliers of,
farm machinery, vehicles, whatever, they're all
okay, so you're thinking about
equipment,
the
tools.
ag-related businesses and the other businesses
But
that are
I
reliant
mean, you're
on.
talking industrial, see, we deal with the industrial side
Okay,
as far as heavy machinery to purchase and do maintenance and whatever else. So all those people are going to be impacted or vulnerable to the drought or based on how things operate.
Your
So,
unemployment rate's gonna go up.
yeah, we used to, we rent machines every year. We try to trade machines every year, but the real fact is when we don't have, the landowners don't have the income, it's kind of hard to go buy a $400,000 piece of equipment with them sitting there struggling to make a living on a farm, even though they are paying O&M so that you can go buy it. It's tough to do.
It's like giving them a pay increase in this year. You wait for the good year and get the big, I mean, it works hand in hand with everything.
Do you think it affects employment?
It does. I think when corn dropped to $3, $2.90, I have landowners that didn't even hire help. They're trying to do it themselves or do it with one person instead of three more.
okay.
Fertilizer dealers.
When you see those job losses, do those start to happen during the drought, or do you tend to see them just after the drought? Do you think?
I think during.
During and after.
All right, we already kind of got it here, but we can write.
And that's two things too, that's not only drought, that's pricing.
Okay.
But probably another thing to touch on here, and I've seen it, is during the 2002 to 2000 drought, the water users learned to live on less.
All water users? Only
All
some?
of them.
All of them, okay.
They learned that they could make a crop with less. It may not have been a bumper crop or, well, I take that back. There's a couple years of beets were higher tonnage and higher sugar. I think they learned
I don't
that,
think that's education.
yeah, that's educational.
education.
They
But
learned
it
that
sounds like you think that's an education thing that sort of comes by doing.
by being forced to do.
Okay, so
But
does it make sense to
they
write that here?
produced higher tonnage
Okay.
sugar beets with higher sugar due to the fact they had to quit irrigating them the 1st of September because they didn't have the water. So the sugar content started coming in. 2 is there was a few years there where the corn production was bumper crop corn production with 2 less waterings or 3 less waterings. They learned how to make it work with less water. But here's the downside to that. After the drought was over and into about the 3rd year of a plentiful water season,
Yeah, right back to,
everything went out.
yeah, pulling the plug on the gated pipe and going to the lake. for
Yeah, let it roll,
Okay.
boys, let it
So-
roll.
My bear.
But
So-
I guess something else I meant on academic impact generally. I think anytime you look at history, when you have spikes and valleys,
Mhm.
it's never good. That's a real nasty, and droughts always cause those spikes. If
Okay.
you look in our commodities,
Mhm.
like we had $8 corn, and we had $3 corn, you get more farm sales, you get more equipment dealers going out of business, you get.
Okay.
It's always better in an economy to have slow, steady growth. And droughts usually cause a spike. So it's a long-term,
Drought means you have less to sell, price goes up.
well, but it causes, you know what I'm saying, when you look at like your economic growth, you'll get this spike where like dealers and businesses sell a lot.
Like we're doing now.
And now we're like this. You take this right across over here, I think they would tell you they're in a recession.
Okay, I want to go back to something you just said about short memories. Because that's come up in a couple of other meetings too. Do you have in mind particular ways of dealing with that?
No, because, and it's a big, long story, and Kevin can jump in on this.
Can we have
if
a
he
short
wants to.
version?
In our reservoir system, it's one pool.
Mhm.
One pool, and we all share that same pool. So in fact, what that means is when it's 100% amount of water, there is nobody within the realms of the North Platte project that are willing to take a slice of it. They want a share of everything. So because we can't say, all right, we got 100% supply, Rick, you get 180,000, Kevin, you get 180,000, and so on and so forth. And you have to manage that, and you have to carry some over every year so you can ensure that you have some for the next year. Then we could say, all right, landowners, we're not blowing and going. You're only going to get 2 acre-feet per acre of water this year, and when you've used it, you're done.
Remember when
But we can't do that. So when the pot's full and everybody's got their hands in it, you can't do it. You just have to deliver.
Building on his point, maybe we need regulations on surface water.
oh, good luck.
No,
I mean,
we can say that.
we tried,
We can say that, can't we?
We voluntarily
We-
wanted
say
to
it.
do it.
we set out,
But see, that
who was your
comes-
board member who did that? We were gonna
That's
do a
probably
voluntary allocation
Howard
before,
Ellison
But
and we could
isn't,
never get all the districts to sign.
to agree.
but isn't that the elephant in the room? I mean,
That is the
really,
elephant in the room.
wouldn't you really like to
But the
see?
thing is you've got government districts, you got natural flow districts, you got Glendo contracts, and you're not going to dice them up. It won't happen.
But as you look at the
But
drought coming, which
It's a
we
perfect
learned,
world.
we
Yeah.
learned from 2000, 2001. It was coming, but we just went ahead and diverted 200,000 acre feet of water anyway, everybody, and poof, 2002.
But see, we can dream.
But I will
plan.
say this, I don't care what organization you are, 2 things. One is, or 3 things. One is you have to have a board that is willing to take a stand and and back a manager to manage. And two is you have to have landowners that are willing to bend and bow with the issues at hand. And for the first little bit that you deal with, your landowners are your biggest hurdle to start with. But once they realize that everyone's being treated equitably, then they kind of calm down, and then it comes down to 100% support of the board members, no matter whether it's good or whether it's bad. You have to have the backing of a board, otherwise you can throw it out the window.
And you're right. We have to look at it a year or two in advance. We can see it coming. We can tell by the snowpack. We can tell by the rain. And if we could have got this done back then, we probably wouldn't have the last two water short years as bad as they were.
I would challenge this group and you to look around the corner, and I'm talking 10 years out, a lifetime sustainability. I think that's why I keep beating that education thing. We in this area of the world, we need to look at every year as being a problem.
But you got to remember what we have already done since the drought. My district has already saved on average 40,000 acre feet a year. I don't know how much Kevin's is.
We used to average close to 200,000. We averaged about 166 to 170.
That's admirable. But what I'm getting at, looking around the corner, water is the blood of this economy. And we have got to get agriculture. It doesn't matter if it's cities with lawns. People don't even look at how much water gets put on lawns. But we as a group have got to educate people. We all got to educate ourselves. We've got to cut down.
Yeah, and we've been working at that at the state level for a number of years now, water sustainability. And it's a hard thing.
But let's start with the people.
Yeah, you got to start with
This is the plan. And I think that needs to be one of the points we drive home. It starts here. What happens today affects tomorrow. I think we got to keep on that.
You need to beat it into the public and say, you can come read this online or come to a meeting.
But education, I mean,
Education.
I'm sorry, we keep going back.
You do, and we can keep talking about education, but I would like to hear something. We've talked about a lot of water-related things, and we've talked about some economic things. What I haven't heard yet is something that is specific to a public power district. So
we get most of our power from Laramie River.
Okay.
From Laramie River Station in Wheeling.
Okay,
So that's water related.
Right, all right. So in a drought, what happens to you?
We're not gonna have it.
You don't have
Now,
the
that
supply.
doesn't mean we may not get it. We have other accesses to it because of our power supplier,
Okay,
but it's not going to be as easy.
okay. So,
And it's probably going to cost more.
okay, so increased cost and so that shows up to the customer as increased utility
Absolutely.
rates?
Somebody's got to
Hold that
pay for it.
You've spoken a lot. I want to hear more from her.
I know, I just was an answer.
Yeah.
Just hang on to it. So, all right, so increased utility rates. Is that just during a drought? Does that continue to
Oh,
be
no.
true
It's
afterwards?
going to continue afterwards.
Okay. What else happened?
And isn't
We're
it
gonna
like
raise
that
the prices
local?
and we're not going
Yeah, I was
down
gonna,
the
isn't it like that local bread? Once it goes up, is it gonna come back down? Probably not.
Okay, what else happens besides those increased utility rates because you have those supply?
Can I talk?
Issues.
Keller spikes. That's really hard on the public power.
So, but the power supply issues,
We have ways of handling that.
okay, but
That's what drought causes.
do those also continue? So even if your utility rates stay high after the drought, are you still having the power supply issues, or do those tend to even themselves out after the drought?
It will depend. If we have water supply again, they will
Okay.
even themselves out,
Okay, but maybe not.
but maybe not.
Okay, so those could continue.
And depending on what you have to do to get that power, if we can't get it from Wheatland
Okay,
and they have to do something else to get it to us from another source,
okay,
you've paid for another access to get it here.
right, okay,
Those costs aren't gonna go away.
okay. Okay. What was the thing you wanted to say?
Well, I'm not on a board, but I know a director pretty well, and they talk about the spikes. Power companies don't like a lot of usage and then no usage in a drought when you turn the pivots off.
Mm-hmm.
Or like in 2012, when we turned them on a month early,
Mhm.
really hard. They weren't ready for that spike.
Okay.
We don't necessarily have that problem, but what
Okay.
we do have a problem, what we have a problem with, that the farmers then have a problem with, is if they turn it on 2 or 3 days before we read, and we're on a demand rate at that point, and they get the demand up there, and then they don't use very many kilowatts, and their costs are sky high.
Okay.
And we try to explain that to them. If you're going to turn it on and use it.
Okay.
And we have that problem then, because in turn, our power supplier is going to charge us for that increase in demand, whether we've got the usage or not.
That's what I was getting at,
Yeah.
the spike.
You don't have to worry about, they're already dumping 400 feet out of the Laramie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's it going?
So
That's right.
your utility rates go up because you've got all these extra supply side issues that you're trying to handle. Sometimes a producer will see that on his bill from the apparent increased power demand. But is that always true? Do you have customers who just quit running stuff as much as possible? So what kind of revenue effects do you see from?
Irrigation is probably our biggest
Okay.
customer
Okay.
as far as revenue goes. So
Okay.
yes, we see a definite
Okay.
change in our revenue from year to year. And
Okay.
last year we had a very good year,
Okay.
even though we've had years, you talk about drought, but a few years back we had excess rain and horrible storms that wiped out fields, and nobody ever went back in and replanted them.
Right.
And they shut those off.
Okay.
And they didn't use them anymore.
Okay.
So that impacted us as well.
Okay. So you may see revenue effects from a drought, but they aren't necessarily always the same effect. So in other words, your revenues aren't always going to go down, or they aren't always going to go up. It sort of depends. Okay. Do you have one more question? What about your infrastructure? So when you have these big spikes in your supply or your demand, or you're having the supply side issues, do you end up with greater infrastructure problems? Do you have to do more maintenance? Is there anything on that end that tends to happen during a drought, maybe, as opposed to non-drought times?
Not necessarily.
Okay. All right.
Not only does it affect them and the producer, but the thousands of people out here that get that raise. You're going to get an annual raise most of the time anyway, of some sort. If I'm under a chimney run. But when they add that other raise, then you got the less fortunate or whoever that have to pay more. Now you're cutting into their food supply, into their being able to pay for their car.
Yeah.
So it trickles right on down to the normal person.
Okay.
Because that's where this whole drought management, not only just for what we do, but for everything. And I think that's what we first discussed last year was, how does it trickle all the way down into and if they have less money to spend in town because they're paying for electric or propane when it was sky high or whatever it is, it affects smaller retailers.
Right.
We don't care if it affects Walmart.
Probably another
That goes
part
all
of
general.
the potential drought mitigation for me and irritation is the insurance companies, agents.
Okay. What happens with it?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're the biggest wasters of natural resources we have. You got a landowner that spent $300 an acre to plant corn and raise corn, and he's got that insured. And a hailstorm or something comes through and wipes out 2/3 of it. But there's still enough there. The insurance company says, well, go ahead and farm it, and we'll pay you the difference or whatever it may be. But the real fact is they waste all the water that could be saved during the drought. They waste the fuel. They waste the landowner's labor and time. They put the wear and tear on all of his equipment. And he gets nothing out of it but a little bit of insurance.
Okay. So to relate that, so you were talking about hail, but which can happen in a drought. But in a drought context, do you see that same kind of thing being true?
Well, yeah, what he's saying.
Okay. So,
I have insurance, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, are you, I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you understand how crop insurance works?
I do. What I'm trying to get at is whether there's an impact that's related to that should be on this list.
Less
And
water
how
on the
you
crop.
would phrase that if you wanted to.
It's under the economics. I mean,
Okay, but economics is pretty broad. So if we can break economics down as much as possible, that's helpful. And we've been doing that with some of the other things that we've been talking about. But if there's an insurance component, then let's talk
well,
about
his point is, if the crops burn up or hail out, and he's still delivering water, that it's basically being wasted.
that. Okay,
And he's
so
only doing that because of insurance. We've all been in those situations.
okay, so maybe if we were going to phrase that in drought-related impact terms, maybe we could say that insurance program requirements creating unnecessary demand on limited natural resources.
On water during,
Okay,
On-
on water supplies maybe?
on drought-stricken water supplies.
And you're thinking about that, is that, I mean, I realize that can happen in any year if it fails or whatever, but
That's the during and
that's
post.
during and post.
Yeah.
Okay,
Happened last year too, and they made them irrigate the corn some of it.
What about recreational? Is that a big deal? I mean, people can't take their boats out. I don't have.
Lake Minute there hasn't been real bad, but they've been hit pretty hard in the past. It's,
Well, like Lake Manager, did you get low where they could take boats out
Yeah.
of water?
yeah, the 2000.
And there was a lot of people in. I mean,
McConaughey was the same way in the 2000s.
is that an issue? I mean,
It's an economic issue for those vendors. It's an economic issue for fish or game and parks, but nobody's gonna buy a park ticket. Nobody's gonna buy fuel for their boat or fishing supplies.
talk about that. We don't have anything about recreation up here on impact, so keep talking about that.
you take the lead, I'm in trouble.
You're in trouble, I'm in trouble.
Don't talk too much.
You were not in trouble. I asked you to
There's a
keep
nudge, Cap, get over it.
Bail me up,
I'm
man.
serious though. I'm serious though. Nobody put anything up here about recreation.
How we
So
look, how I see it was, it's how he lived 4 months in Lake Minute, but Dennis puts less water in the lakes year after year, and about the third year or fourth year, you weren't putting a boat in that lake. Nobody was fishing, nobody was buying park permits.
But
People would drive around just to see how freaking low it was, or go look at the old town of Lemoyne,
Yeah.
you know,
Oglala had a lot of people.
so your
But you got-
recreation drops.
you gotta remember,
They're
the
built
North
for
Platte
irrigation.
Project reservoirs are not
I know.
designated recreation, period.
But it's still a big economic factor.
Right.
Tell the boating crowd that.
On the boat, or the jet skiers, or.
And you know, that might be something to bring up in education, what you just said.
What?
About,
Oh, they're not designated.
Right.
We talk about it all the
how many
time.
people know that though?
Not very many. That's why McConaughey's never won a lawsuit in Fairway. It was never designated.
no, that's actually not why.
The town of
Okay, but
Guernsey
still,
every
it's a
year
good reason.
raises a ruckus because we drive Guernsey Reservoir up
Oh, boy.
and run it on the bottom for the silt.
Okay.
So we have agreed not to hamper the 4th of July weekend by doing that, so we wait till after the 4th of July,
You know,
which we're the ones suffering because we could take that silt now.
The NRD games could do a few more days
He's
of
got a good
horrible
point there.
season.
Okay.
So with recreation, I would put in a drought with the big lake and these lakes in the millions,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
in the millions,
Well,
easy.
Okay.
He has a good point too, because of recreation, they can't do a silt run.
Yes,
Well, we hold it off because of
That's
recreation.
Bureau-
not our problem.
Bureau of Reclamation got a lot of pressure on them from the state of Wyoming.
But isn't the silt run important to help you save?
Sure.
It's right, but we, the NRD, have nothing to do with the soul run.
But I thought we were just looking for,
That's one reason the aquifer's full, because we didn't get it till the 7th of August, and we lost water. Like,
Boiling on the ground everywhere.
Okay. I am about to let you take a break. Do we have anything else we want to add to this before we do that?
I think we've been good students.
I think so too. We
I think
expanded our
we're
list
all
quite a bit.
Been around a lot, you know, we've seen a lot.
Okay.
We're
Four people,
knowledgeable.
All right.
we've got a lot on the board for